Jamie, so good to see you. Thank you so much for joining me today. How's it going?
Hey, Paul, doing well. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. Yeah, when we conceived of this idea, your name was definitely on the top of my list. So appreciate you coming on. So to start out, I'd love for you to just give our audience a little bit of a background of you, your company. So yeah, tell us about your company, what it looks like today.
Yeah, Precision Machine. We've been around since 1997. I was 24 at the time. Started it from scratch. Didn't come from a silver spoon. Didn't actually know how I was going to do it. A local bank here decided to take a chance on somebody who had no money and basically had no assets, and just said, "Hey, what's going on?" And so we went in and talked to him, and my dad had secured some loans for a kind of a small business and was always good at paying everything back. And they said, "Well, your family history is you guys pay your bills, so we'll take a chance." So we were able to secure some money and got started. And then a couple months into it, a local tooling supplier walked in and he said, "What are you guys up to?" And we said, "Well, we're starting a machine shop." And he's like, "Well, I hear you might need some tooling and some fixtures." And we're like, "Yep, that's true." And he goes, "Well, here," he goes, "give me your left hand." And I stuck my left hand out and he put the book in there, which had all of his cutting tools and everything he sold. And he looked me in the eye and he said, "Now give me your right hand." And I gave him my right hand, and he said, "On this shake," he said, "I'm going to give you $50,000 of anything you need in that book, and you pay me when you can." And wow. When I was 24 and not having anything and starting with nothing, I mean, that kind of set the standard for me about, I grew up in a household where, you worked hard and you didn't have to be asked to do things. You just knew that you had to do them and do them right.
Yep.
But from that point forward, it was kind of like I knew in my gut that my roles and responsibilities were to pay it forward, to make sure that I was always doing the right thing. And I needed to stick my neck out for other people because of what they did for me. So that's kind of how the basis started. We had no customers when we started. We left another local machine shop. My uncle, or my cousin at the time, he came over and started the business with me.
Okay.
And we left the machine shop locally, and the owner basically said, "When you guys get started, you let me know and I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you work. I'm going to make sure you guys got stuff to do." And there was another point where I'm like, why does another machine shop offer to help one get started? So there's just been all of these little milestones right from the start that really kept me humble and just made sure that I was focused on paying it forward, because again, there were so many people that stuck their neck out for us that didn't have to. So we basically got started in the job shop market. We didn't get into sheet metal or fab. We did a little bit of it early, but we got out of it in a hurry. We stuck to mostly turning and milling. It just took it slow. We'd hire one or two people here or there, or we'd hire or bring in another machine. And, before we knew it, we were, 15, 20, 30 people. And we've been at it now for just over 24 years. We have just over 50 people. We work 7 days a week. We have around 20-ish machines of the vertical, the horizontal, 5-axis, turning. So again, we still don't make our own product. It's all custom made to blueprints from our customers. So I would say our revenues are somewhere between 7 and 10 million, and that's growing as well. So our reach is global. It used to be within an hour and a half, 2-hour drive of our location on the shore of Lake Michigan, but now it's global, and it's gotten that way over the last 10 years. Which is, again, for a small town company, it's pretty crazy to realize that your products can go to France and everywhere in between. So,
yeah, probably to outer space even, or down under the sea, right? Parts go everywhere.
Yeah, we've made products that do definitely go into spaceships and rocket ships and stuff like that. So,
wow, what a remarkable origin story. That's really amazing.
Yeah.
And you were young. How did you get the gall to start a machine shop at 24?
Well, my background's mechanical design. from high school on, I wasn't really big into learning. I couldn't wait to get out of high school. I knew 4-year colleges weren't for me. I tried to follow in my parents' footsteps. My mom was a nurse. I was going to be a nurse, and she told me, go do what you want. Then I went to my dad. My dad worked a full-time job for the Postal Service and then had some side businesses where he had a small machine shop and he did electrical and refrigeration work. And I said, well, what if I went to school and got my electrician degree? And he said, nope, you go do what you want. Well, here's a 17-year-old kid trying to figure out what to do. And I didn't like school and I had no purpose. And I'm like, what am I going to do? And I went to mechanical design because I thought it sounded interesting. And I did that for a while after I got my degree. And then I ended up in a machine shop. And I'm like, I think I can do this for myself. 2 things that drove me to it were, one, customers. I wanted to do the best I could for them. Back in the 90s, when I was in it, there was a lot of, we'd go get a bunch of work and we try to get it done. And when we couldn't get it done, the customer would be like, well, we're going to take it all from you because you're not getting it done. And then we'd hurry up and get it done and work all kinds of crazy hours. And that's just the cycle. And it was the same thing with the employees. Employees would come to work and be like, I hate my job and this sucks. And like, this is no life. And I'm like, why do people come to work every day and just try to survive? So I felt like if I went into business, my 2 main focuses were, let's do a good job for the customer and let's try to figure out how we can give employees a life where they can come to work and like be creative and enjoy it for, 30 plus years rather than being miserable and just trying to pay the bills.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been kind of my focus. And even today, it's still the same.
Yeah. Well, I think there's fewer more important cornerstones than taking care of your employees, who will then make sure they take care of your customers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Very cool. So tell us so you obviously have a diverse client base all around the world. What is your specialties? Do you work in aerospace or medical or space or nuclear or all the above? What do you do?
I would say the largest majority of products we make go to aerospace, so in the commercial airline seating business. Then I would say we get into like forest industry, a lot of industrial equipment, like earth moving equipment, a lot of packaging and printing equipment. So we really don't seek out specific industries as far as like we'll only do work with certain ones. I mean, we're in a lot of different ones, but I would say those are kind of the majority. Our materials, pair with that. So we spend a lot of time in aluminum and plastics. We also have a fair amount in steels, different grades, and we dabble in some of the other stuff as well. But I would say like the aluminum, plastic, and steel are probably the 3 big ones we deal with.
Mm-hmm. And what are some in the sort of growth story? So you started with basically you and your cousin, is that right?
Yep.
Is that what you said?
Yep.
Yeah. So how long was it before you hired your first employees, or what kind of building did you start out in compared to what you are today? Have you moved a bunch? Some of the logistics of your growth. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we started in a rental. So the guy who had the building for rent, I knew him. He owned a local restaurant, and we went over to meet with him one day. And he's like, "Yeah, I'll rent you some space." So we came in and cleaned up the building for him, and we rented. There was 7,200 square feet to start, and we only took like about half of it. And we cleaned it all up. And my dad and my father-in-law and some of our relatives, my grandparents, they would come in and they would help us with the labor portion. So they would change parts and they would package parts, and they would drive our materials truck around to go deliver. My grandma would come in on Saturdays and make meals in the shop. So she'd bring in like all the ingredients and she'd cook breakfast from scratch, and she'd come in and, make lunch for the guys, and her and my grandpa would wash dishes and just hang out and visit, take out the garbage, all that stuff. So it was, very like family driven right from the start. So, that's kind of how we started with the labor curve. Then we ended up hiring our first employee probably within the first year. And he's still here today, which is kind of cool.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, he's still a very big part of what we do, does a lot of programming and kind of problem solving on programs that aren't running well. So he's very technical, and spends a lot of his time, teaching teammates and taking on new machines when we get them. So, so he's still here. But yeah, the building has, started at that level. And then I think it was in like 2006, we bought the building, and then we just completely remodeled it, added on. And we've added on like 3 or 4 times since we took it over. And I think now we have like 26,000 square feet. And we still have another 10,000 we can put on if we need to. So we luckily have never had to move out of our original building, which is, I think, been.
Yeah, that is nice.
So
yeah, we moved our shop when it was about 3 years old. We had about maybe 5-6 machines, but we moved it about 2 hours away from the original location. So that was, a lot of logistics, a lot of expense, and some downtime. So
we looked at it a couple times, but it just wasn't, for what we were going to get out of it, it just wasn't worth it. So we just stayed with what we had.
Well, it's nice that you're able to buy the facility and be your own landlord. That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you hold some quality certifications. What was that like? When did you decide to pursue them? Why did you pursue them? How has that worked out in terms of opening doors or your just credentials with clients? Can you
one of our biggest clients basically had a meeting every year, and in one of the meetings they said, "Hey, just so you know, our suppliers are going to be required to achieve AS9100 certification." Up until that point, we hadn't had zero. We had no ISO. We had nothing. We just basically did our own quality program, and when customers would come in and do their audits, we would take their advice and make improvements as we could, but we had no formal system. So we then went from 0 systems to AS9100. We got that done. Then right after that, the year after that, we were asked by the same customer to get environmental ISO 14001.
Okay.
So we did that. Then we went through a Wisconsin Green Tier program, which basically was an environmental program through the state of Wisconsin, and achieved that. We ran that for a few years and then found out that some of the customers that were demanding these types of certifications were also saying that our pricing was getting a little bit on the high side, and they started farming their work out to shops that had no certification. So then we basically said to them, for the investment, we definitely got better as a company, but it's making it really hard to compete at the same level because they're sending it to places that had no certification and were much smaller than us. And we basically ended up getting rid of all of our systems for a short period of time. And then what we did is we changed the new ISO 9001 2015 standard. We then got certified to that, and now we currently run that today. We don't have any customer requirements to AS9100 and or the 14001. So we continue to go through our regular updates and audits, and we keep progressing that system, which is obviously adding a bunch of value to us and our customers. But we don't have the aerospace standard in place today.
Sure. Well, if your customers aren't demanding it, definitely. How big were you when you went through that first process of getting AS? How many folks were on the team, or what year?
My mind's not real good as far as how far back it was and the quality or the quantity of people. But I want to say it was at our high point where we were somewhere in that 60 to 75 range as far as employees, which would have been, 5+ years ago, maybe even a little bit longer than that. But we kind of went like crazy as far as growth and employees. And all of a sudden we looked and we're at 75 and we were, at 50. It's like, what just happened? And it was hard to control. We had taken some work that we probably shouldn't have, that didn't fit us real well. We were doing some things just because growth was on our doorstep, and it wasn't really the best planned growth. And we just kind of scaled that back and kind of really started looking at what we're good at. And we're still today always looking at, are we doing the right parts? Do we have the right customers? What fits us best. So I think that's always a work in progress.
Absolutely. Brings up a great question, and it's actually one that's been on my mind. I was just looking back at some old videos of my shop and a recording of an employee meeting, an all-staff meeting we had. And I was presenting our customer report cards that we had designed and built, scorecards for our clients, and really honing in on those good fit customers and making sure we're taking work that was good fit for the shop, and the companies were culturally aligned with us and treated us fairly and well. So yeah, I can certainly agree that that's so important. How do you think about the diversification of your client base in terms of how big do you want to, how big do you want to cap any particular one client or industry to try to stay diversified? Obviously, you've been in the industry long enough now. You've been through some of those ups and down cycles, and diversification seems to be really important for those. So how do you think about that?
I think diversification is always on the table. I think when your workload is starved, where you're kind of at a bottom of a cycle, or a certain customer is slower, or there's an economic downturn, those are the moments you look at each other and go, man, we should have been planning for this, or we should have been, looking to bring on 10 new customers. But when it's really good and your customer base is just piling work up as high as they can and you just can't get it done, it's really, really difficult to try to figure out how do you bring a new customer on. So I think that we all have good intentions of keeping things very level as far as like customer levels internally. But I think what happens is it's natural when they're busy to get out of whack. But when it slows, it definitely shows its, kind of its ugly head. So I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, when it's busy, how do we create a space within our company that if we were to go get a new customer tomorrow, that we can give them a 2-week lead time. Mm-hmm. And we're not there yet, but that's our next big development, is to say, let's plan an area within the company that only runs based on the need of a new customer. So that way we can always let people, go out and do some sales and just be like, hey, don't worry about our lead time being 14 weeks in a normal machine. We got an area that, as long as the volume isn't crazy, we could run some new product through, or we could do a prototype, or we could show you our services and you could get it within 2 weeks.
Right. That's nice. That's a great idea. So are you, I guess, what percentage of your business is your largest client today?
I would say, because as busy as they are, since, the aerospace industry is obviously recovering from COVID and the effects of it. I mean, there was a period there that it was really, really down. And now where it's at and how it's growing, I would say, on a good month, it's probably north of 50.
North of 50% with your largest client.
Yeah.
And is that a number you're trying to get down by growing others and expanding other places?
Yeah, we'd like to see more like low 20s.
Yeah. Seems like a healthy number.
Yeah.
So for those not watching on video, there's a wall behind you of lots of quotes and pictures. It seems like you approach your business very thoughtfully. Tell us a little bit about your culture. Obviously, if your first employee is still with you, I'm sure it's pretty good. Mm-hmm. But culture is really one of the things that differentiates a lot of the shops I get to visit. So yeah, tell us about what makes your culture special, or how you approach that.
I would say, the way I'm wired is I'm a relationship guy. I spend a lot of time on people. In some cases, maybe a little bit too much. I'm trying to learn from my teammates as well every day. I have some teammates that are hardwired for numbers and production and throughput, and let's just get the job done. And, they don't want to take 5 minutes to hug anybody, where I'm, going to spend a half hour checking in on everybody, giving them a hug, and then we're going to talk about numbers. So I think it takes the right team to create culture. And I think you need, very well balanced. So I need my opposite in the room at all times. Otherwise, we just can't get to the best outcomes. But I would say for me, it's been more about, I think the family dynamic has always been here. It started, with grandma and my grandpa coming in, and my parents and, my in-laws and everybody coming in and trying to help and cooking meals. And on Fridays, we, get together in the back and fire up the grill and have lunch. And I think that's continued, and that's been a real staple in our success is that people feel like this is more than a job. We ask people now, why do you work here? Not like we're trying to chase them away, but we're just really trying to learn, like, what is it about what we do that keeps you coming back for more? And it can't be just about money. So, for us, it's, we spend a lot of time asking questions, how do we improve training? How do we motivate you to get more done? How do we empower you to grow to the next level? Some years back, maybe 4 years ago or so, I met Dave Ramsey for the first time. And I now remember, I started a business when I was 24. I have no formal education in business management. I have no business degree. I don't know how to manage people. I never came to this facility to start this company with any experience on how to do a review. Like, I basically learned everything from the fly. And that's not an excuse, but that's the reality. And when I came here, I didn't learn all the ins and outs on how to manage a profit loss statement, what a balance sheet meant. I had great accounting, I had great, banking resources, and they supported me. And I kind of leaned on them a lot. So I ended up at one point, about $3 million in debt. And I just found Dave Ramsey, and I went to one of his seminars, and I came back, and my world has changed ever since. Within the next probably 12 months, we paid off, our debts. We basically got the company to where it needed to be. And it started to cause a domino effect where I said, I can't expect more of my people if I don't get better. So then I started looking more internal before external. And then I just recently completed my wellness life coaching degree. And I use it on a regular basis. I run classes at work during work time. I help empower people into whatever changes of life they want to make, because of what I've seen is that if you get your employee healthy in their thoughts, what they do for you it comes very easy. They can communicate what they're feeling. They feel like there's no threats. They look at things as opportunity central. They know they're supported. So, you just get the best of both worlds. And when they leave here, they're better for the community. They're better for their families. They're better for themselves. And we kind of had to quit during COVID, and now we're just going to restart it again. I had about 20 people of my company that went through almost a half a year of training. And now there's a bunch of them coming back that are like, man, I just need to get back on this horse. So yeah, and then we're going to start doing that with also our local high school too, because there's so many kids that are lost in the shuffle, and we're going to try starting a self-development program where we can really focus on, hey, what are you thinking? How are you feeling? What are we gonna do to help those kids navigate their own lives?
Wow, Jamie, that's really amazing, good stuff. I know that you already get involved in the high schools. On your website, you can see, some of the videos of you engaging and some of the training you're doing. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Obviously, finding new employees is almost top of the list of every shop that I talk with these days. But you've really put some long-term investments into that. So I'd love to hear you talk about those things.
Yeah. So one of the administrators here in town, when he came in the summer before he was going to start, he reached out to us and said, hey, how do we help? And, we thought that was very cool because his mindset was cutting edge. He was like, hey, we got to do things different. We got to get these kids involved. And got the school board to donate some money towards the project. They started putting in CNC lathes, CNC mills. They got our local tech college on board, got them to donate some resources, and it started to evolve. We'd send our guys up there to do training, teach the kids Mastercam, try to help the teacher who was relatively new to it. And over the course of time, the program itself has kind of fallen apart a little bit. But now there's kind of some new administration coming in, and we're not sure what the guidelines are going to be, or if they're going to, kind of change that whole model again. But we're hopeful that, we can get kind of back on it because it's so good for the community. And, we always told those kids, like, you want to come here to learn, or you want to talk to our guys, we'll bring them up there, and you don't have to come to Precision. This isn't like, if we talk to you, you can only come here. We're like, if you go into manufacturing, it's a great deal for everybody. So, it's kind of slowed down a little bit. We used to hire a fair amount of kids coming out of there, and it's kind of dried up here in the last year or so. But there's great potential there. So we're hoping to kind of rekindle that, get that back rolling, and then at least get those kids interested. So again, if they end up in fabrication, it's great. If they go to another machine shop besides here, great. Maybe they end up in a purchasing role in a manufacturing facility. Like we all got to do our part to try to get those kids engaged, because I'm one of those kids, and I think there's a lot of them that don't necessarily want to invest their lives into, a 4-year degree. There's nothing wrong with it, but the reality is you can make some serious money with on-the-job training or a 2-year technical degree. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I know. Well, I'm not surprising that things slowed down. I mean, with COVID, a lot of schools weren't weren't in person for a while. It's hard to learn shop class when you're not actually physically there.
Right.
Wow. Well, that's back in my shop days, there was not a high school, but our local technical college had a machining program, and we always had 2 employees that were on the advisory board of that program. Mm-hmm. And it was definitely a long-term investment, but we, over the years, us and a couple other local shops really put a lot of attention in helping that program to kind of upskill, what they were teaching. Because when we started, they were still teaching high-speed steel tools and, manual mills and lathes, and not really the skills that we need our new employees to have. So, but, that over the years, the program got considerably better. And yeah, we were able to recruit and hire sort of the cream of the crop every year of students coming out of that program. So definitely, if you're listening to this and there's a program near you, or you can help start one, it's a great investment in our manufacturing economy and those kids that could really use. Because I think there's a lot of kids that they realize they don't want to necessarily do a 4-year degree, but they're not sure what the other options are.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too that's been, I don't know, maybe just an out of the box solution. And I'm not saying this because we should all go around and steal everybody's employees, but I think the other thing is that look around when you're out in public or you go on vacation. And one thing that happened to me was I'd go to our local Subway all the time, and I'd be in there, and all the different people that work there, and you're in there one day, and one of the employees says, "Hey," he's like, "what do you guys do over there?" And we just kind of told him, some of the things that we do. And he's like, "Well, hey, I'd like to come over and just kind of take a tour." And I'm like, "Hey, no problem." And you can pick up on their customer service, how well they work with other people on their team, what they do during adversity. I just found sometimes it wasn't like I went there to steal anyone's employee. I basically was in a moment of just ordering a sandwich, and the next thing I know, I have an employee that now comes over because he feels like what he wants in his own life is a piece of family, and he came here and says every day it's one of the best things he's ever done.
I love that. Yeah, I was just visiting a shop on Monday, 2 days ago, and his number 1 and number 2 employees were both kids that he hired 12 years ago to mow his lawn and do yard work for him. Mm-hmm. And then they started helping out in the shop because the shop was in his garage on the property. Yep. And now they run their fabrication department and his machining department, those kids. Yeah. So that's I love those stories. Mm-hmm. One thing I'd like to ask is how you approach transparency in the finance of your business. Whether you're making money, losing money, jobs, clients. Some shops keep things pretty tight. Others are pretty wide open book. How do you approach that topic?
Well, I'm a very down to earth guy. I'm a handshake guy. If you walked in here, you would see everything. I could tell you, the wages I make. I could show you the books. I could tell you what profits are. I could tell you what sales are. I could tell you what we spend on material. Our internal accounting department, I tell them if anybody comes to you and asks anything, let them know. We just had a company meeting that lasted about 45 minutes. We tell them This is the set of books we run, and this is the only set of books we run. This is what the end game is. This is where we lose money. This is where we make money. This is how, this month went versus that month. I think if you want people to trust you, you have to trust them. And yes, it's sensitive information, but if it's clean information and if it's real and your meaning behind it is all very genuine, what do you have to worry about? I don't, in the 24 plus years I've been here, I've never ever once had any issue with anything that's been given to an employee, a customer that comes in and asks a question. Like, I've never ever said, I'm done, I will never do that again.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's great. Yeah. We had pretty open books at our shop. Whenever we'd have our monthly staff meetings, we'd share how much money we made last month, what we lost, if it was a loss, what our cash balances were. We'd dig into actual jobs. We lost money on this job for this reason, what we're going to learn from that situation, what we're going to change in the future to do better. And so employees could directly see how their actions, related to the profitability of jobs and the whole company. And then, of course, we also implemented profit sharing, which was just all a part of that, right? I
think the hardest pill for them to swallow is to realize that for every dollar you bring in, you hope to keep 10 cents, 15 cents, 20 cents. Like, at the end of the game, taxes are all paid. They look at you like you're crazy. Like, you got into business to keep 10 cents on every dollar. Right. I'm like, everybody thinks like business owners are just like carrying truckloads of money to the bank. The reality is we're just trying to earn a good living, and we're trying to take care of the people that work for us, and we're trying to be sustainable for tomorrow. But the reality is that that's your expenses. You tell them what you pay in health insurance, and you tell them what a month's worth of payroll is, and their eyeballs light right up, and you're like, well, this is real. Like, this is what it costs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there are some periods of time where your employees make more than you do, because that's what needs to happen.
You're the last person to eat, and some days it's Cheerios.
Yeah. That's awesome. So you talked about customers and growing. How do you find your customers? Do you have internal sales teams? Is it all word of mouth, or how do you go about your sales and marketing efforts there?
So from day one, the very first customer we had in aerospace was the first 3 months we were open. My grandma was making Thanksgiving dinner, and she said, hey, tonight on the news, you might want to watch. There's a segment coming on with a local manufacturing company that's looking to hire. And this was, again, in 97, and the economy during that period was not great. It was obviously tough to find work. And so we listened to it the next day, which would have been on Sunday. We went back to work on Monday, so we called, and the lady said, well, why don't you take a drive up? So I went up there, and she took me into their break room and said, stand right here. And I'm like, all right. So I stood there. She went out in the shop. She got me 2 parts. She put them in my hand, and she goes, can you make these things? And I'm like, I think we can. Yeah. She's like, well, good. I'm going to go cut you a purchase order. I'm like, what do you mean a purchase order? She's like, I'm going to cut you an order, and you're going to deliver these parts to me as soon as you can, and I'm going to pay you on COD. And I looked at her, and I go, you pay on COD? She goes, yeah. She goes, we're in a growth spurt, and we're having a cash flow issue, so we're paying cash on delivery. So I'm like, wow. I'm like, this is crazy. So that's how the first one got in the door, other than our shop that we left that said, we'll keep you busy. And then the rest of it is just kind of evolved from lots and lots of cold calling, driving around industrial parks, knocking on doors. One of our largest customer today was we were able to secure those folks by doing an internet research on some things that we were looking for in diversification, and we found it with them and what kind of products they built and what kind of services they needed. So we called up and we left message after message after message because they're not local. And what I ended up doing was I ended up telling them, look, here's the deal. If you give me 1 or 2 parts, I'll make it for free. We'll do the whole thing. You don't need to cut a purchase order. And what I want you to do is we're going to put all of our certifications to it. We're going to package it accordingly. And I'm going to deliver it to your desk. I want you to cut it open. I want your team to go through it. I want you to send it through quality. And I want you to tell me if it's worth it or not. And today they're the largest customer we have. And I just recently ran that same thing on LinkedIn, where I proposed anybody who's interested to test drive the services, and I haven't gotten any responses, which again, it is what it is. But most of our work is either repeat business, cold calling, or a referral. Like someone will move jobs and they're like, "Hey, I'm over at this place now. Like, would you do some stuff for us?" So yeah, if we had a dedicated sales staff, I mean, we'd probably be twice our size.
Mm-hmm. But you've been able to grow at the pace you wanted through the methods that you just described.
Yeah, and in some cases, it's been a little too much.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to dig into that a little bit. One of the sayings that I firmly believe in is many companies don't die of starvation, they die of indigestion, right? They try to take on too much, too fast, grow too much. Yeah. Sounds like you went through a period where you grew a lot, maybe faster than you really should have. I know in our shop, we certainly had some periods like that. Can you describe some of that journey, what that was like?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you see the lows, being in this business now this long, there's been many periods that have been really tough. Economic downturns, presidencies, you name it. Now we have the pandemic, and it's just been, like one thing after another. You feel like you're getting 4 or 5 years of good, honest growth, and then all of a sudden, man, it just hits the skids. So I think that, you're always, when it's busy, you're always like, I guess, kind of semi-worried about when's the next one coming, when's it going to slow down. So you try to take on as much as you can, and sometimes it's not always the best approach. Focus on what you're doing right now versus worrying about, what's to come tomorrow, when you really can't predict, what's going to happen. So, we got into some stuff that was a little too big for us. We ended up bringing in some machinery that was a little too large. We were bringing in customers that, we felt like the work was good, but the profit margins didn't exist. And we weren't doing a good job at controlling our costs, or I should say even knowing our costs. We were just running, right? Where we got all this work to do. We don't got time to worry about that. Like, let's just get it done. And you go through a 30-day cycle for a month, and you look at the bottom line and go, man, we stuck a ton of hours in this stuff, and we busted our tail, and we tried to do everything we could, and we didn't make any money. Like, what's wrong with this picture? So It didn't take very, very long, and we were like, well, we got to start revamping what we're doing.
How do you think about, or how do you do job costing is a big topic in a lot of shops. Some of them have really tight controls and know all about it, and others just gut feel. Is our bank account bigger at the end of the month than it was at the start? Yeah. Right? How do you think about job costing these days?
Well, I think job costing is super important, but I think having a really good handle on the estimating side is super important. I think just knowing, like, what are you predicting? I know things change. I know it can be better or worse. I realize that nobody's perfect on the estimating side, but I think really understanding, what am I getting myself into here? What are my risk factors is a great place to start. Then you go run the job, and then you can compare things and be like, okay, I think all the stuff we do has information tied to it. It's just a matter of, what do you want to take the time to evaluate? I think that you can get analysis paralysis. I think you can be stuck in this vicious cycle of, counting every nickel, counting every penny, and it's really not paying off at the end. You're still having a kind of a rough bottom line, or maybe no bottom line. I think for us, it's more about, how do we see the jobs flowing through the shop? What are our pain points? Do we have machines held up? Do we have a lot of quality issues? Do we have a lot of remakes? Do we have a lot of customer complaints? So our first thing is always looking at, if you were to drop, a golf ball in a 5-inch diameter pipe, it would fly right through there. But if you were to drop a golf ball in a 3/8 diameter pipe, it ain't going anywhere. It's just going to sit there. And then someone's going to stand on top of it, and that don't work. And then they're going to use a vice grip to drive it in, or a hammer. Right. So we've all run those kinds of jobs. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to take all the restriction out of it. And if a job doesn't just flow through, I mean, we expect some type of pain, but if the pain is minor and there's very little disruption, then we know we're on the right path. And then once we do that, you can almost assume that your job cost details are going to be in line. It's where you have pain and suffering, and you listen to your employees, and they're pulling their hair out, and some of them want to quit, and they're throwing things, and they keep asking, like, why do you keep taking this stuff? when you really start to listen with both ears, not just to respond, but to really hear what your team is saying, you'll find all of those restrictions, but you got to trust them because they're the ones who are dealing with it. It's not that they don't know anything, but sometimes we take it and go, you know what, we're a job shop. We can do anything. We can solve every problem. And the reality is that's true to some degree, but it also is what hurts you as well.
Yeah, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right.
Right. Take any job.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we learned those lessons the hard way as well. There were times when you don't want to say no to something. You want to say, oh yeah, we can totally do that. But the reality is you have no business doing it. And you're right. Listening to your folks doing the work in the trenches, that is so important.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest challenges you're facing today? And what are you doing to solve them?
I think the customer, we got Amazon, we got, cell phones, we got the internet, we got all of these tools that have been given to society to improve life, to speed it up, to make it faster. I think that's the number one game. I think it's even a bigger game than it is with the employee market. I think speed. I think the customer looks at it and says, I just sent you an email 10 minutes ago for an estimate. Why isn't it done? Like, I think the reality of how we're forced to work as human beings is getting so fast. Like, there's no room, there's no time. It's just expected that Amazon packages outside. Why isn't my estimate here?
Yeah.
And then it flows into the order. Like, what do you mean you're telling me there's a 12-week lead time? Like, it should be done in a week. Like, is it really that big a deal? So I think that in the game of how you lay out your shop, how your paperwork flows, how you do business, I listen to I listen to a lot of motivational videos and just people talk about different things. And one of the things that I picked up this week is that we as human beings, especially in the workforce, we have to become more and more adaptive. And that was the word that they focused on, because I think that what got us here is great, but it is surely not going to get us to where we need to be tomorrow. So I would say our focus internally is, we typically every couple of years will pick up the machines, literally drag them out on the street, leave them there, go in the shop, scrub all the floors, and then we got a plan to put them in place to revamp how that product flows through there. How do we get people to use their time better? How do we make sure that there's less steps involved? How do we get the packaging to the machine? I actually went and watched an open heart surgery because I've come from a medical background, and to me, manufacturing, their idea of performance is, I go home at 4:00, I'll do it tomorrow. Medical says, we just knocked grandma out to put a hip in her, and if the parts aren't here, that's a problem. We are not waking her up, sending her home, and telling her to come back tomorrow. So I wanted to bring the medical logic and mentality to kitting and to the resources, and I will tell you, we're far from perfect, but we're a lot better than we used to be. But as soon as we could try to talk about how we do things more in a medical mindset, it changes the game completely. Like, you don't just walk out of here at 2:00 because your shift's over. You might have to stay till 2:15 just to finish that so someone else could be successful and keep, grandma under anesthetic. So I think sometimes it's just in your culture. It's been that way forever. Does it make it right? No, it doesn't. Do you want to change or don't you? Do you want to be left in the dust or do you want to move forward? I think that's the mark of a great company is, like, can you take the whole dynamic of everyone and not just tell them what to do, get them to show you as the owner, as the management group, as the leadership group, like, hey, team, we're going to change the shop and here's why. Like, what? Like, you had a group of people do that? Yeah. Like, that's what we're coaching every day is, I want everyone here to look at an area and feel like, whether it's your area or not, you got to tell us, like, this isn't working.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So you actually literally pull your machines out and relay out where your machines are located to try to improve the process flow. And
yeah, we just bought a brand new Haas with a brand new pallet cell that has a robot on it. We bought a brand new lathe. And now what we're doing is we see, like, one of our machining centers is kind of been one guy on the machine, not really a lot around him to run. And he's raised his hand and said, hey, if you give me a cell, I could easily run it. So now we're using him and his teammates around him to design that cell So now what they can do is they can put a couple lathes in a C shape, do 3 ops in one scheduled event, send it right across the aisle to a double mill cell, and it goes out the door in a week versus 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So they're responsible for, hey, I got an idea. Hey, company, will you listen to us? And the answer is yes. We let them work together and develop the design and the layouts, and then we turn around and then we support them and let them put it in. We might give some opinion along the way, but I heard one of the best lines ever. Can you tell me, when somebody rents a car, how many of those people will actually wash the car before they bring it back? And the answer is probably 0 or very few, and the reason being is because they have no ownership in it. If they bought that car and they ran it through a bunch of potholes and it got all dirty and it was a brand new car, it's almost guaranteed they're going to take care of it and clean it. It's the same thing in the business world. Is we found, and we continue to hear the benefits of, give them ownership and support them along the way, and they will basically take care of you forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I love that approach. That's remarkable. So that sounds like that the culture of continuous improvement sounds like it's pretty well embedded into your culture and your team.
It's there. It's talked about a lot, but let's face it, when you're dealing with human beings, they don't like change. They don't like confrontation. They don't like to talk about things that are sensitive. So that's the coaching side of what I needed to learn, is because when you have the human dynamic, they don't always just deal well with numbers and facts. They need to feel, obviously, there's some emotion there and it has to be dealt with. So I think that, as much as we want them to be robotic, it doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, humans are emotional creatures, and that's how they make decisions. So, yeah, I've never talked to a shop owner that has invested so much time into learning about the people side, and I mean, just the training that you went through to get that coaching, and now leveraging that and helping your employees grow that way that's an amazing long-term vision for what's so important.
I did an interview. I did not an interview, but a review with one of my guys that's been here quite a long time. And when he first started, he could tell you that he wasn't the most fond of people. He was very short with people. He was very abrasive with people. He was very sarcastic with people. And he says to me today, he goes, I never thought in a million years I'd become a people person. He's probably one of the people that can have a very difficult conversation with another person and then have lunch with them in the afternoon and they still respect each other. And it's straight across the board. And, he chose, with some guidance and some help and some work, he chose that path for himself. And that's what I think is so cool about the human spirit, is that if you invest in them and you show them that there are better ways of doing it, they will do the work because they want to. And it's just crazy what people can achieve if they're in the right environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can let them thrive to the level that they are capable of.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm sure we've probably already heard it, but I'd love to have you maybe distill, as we wrap up here, just kind of the secrets of your success and what you would give to as advice to a younger shop owner, someone just starting out in the business. What's your best takeaways?
Wow. This is where, if I wrote a book, I could just say, well, go read this book. But there's a lot of highs and a lot of lows. And I think that, you got to keep things in perspective. Like, why are you doing it? Whether you're doing it for money or you're doing it to change, society, or you're trying to prove something. Like, I think you have to understand your why. Simon Sinek talks about it a lot. And I think a lot of people don't know why they do things. And I think that's super, super important, because it'll really keep you grounded in the good days and in the bad days. It'll keep you focused on where you're headed. It'll help you make good decisions. I would say, too, the other thing is, never be discouraged. There are days where you're like, why am I doing this? Like, this makes no sense. I could go get a job somewhere else. I could have a heck of a lot less stress. But the reality is that it's very easy to walk away. It's a lot harder to dig in and just fight the task head on. So I think, just having that mindset of, why am I doing it? And then just be real. Like, it's going to be tough. And, I think we're all a little bit like this, is that, you don't necessarily always like to ask for help because that proves you're weak or that you don't know everything. And I think that's been one of my successes is I've not been afraid to ask for help, whether it's accounting or whatever it may be, software, working with you guys. We get frustrated a lot, and you got the internet, you got people, you got a network, you got to reach out, you got to use it, you got to ask questions, the other thing is you got to get out of your norm. You got to get out of your norm and you got to go see how other people do it. You got to get in different industries. Like for me, I went to healthcare. I said, I want to see an open heart surgery. I had a medical background. I was an EMT at the time. It was easy for me to get in the hospital. That's how I got into it. But we all know people, and you got to use them not in a negative sense, but you got to use them to learn. And that's the other thing is don't be scared to learn. It doesn't prove anything other than, people will admire you because you've identified that we're not doing okay the way we are. We got to change. So, I think anybody can do it, but if you're in it to work 9 to 5, or you're in it to work Monday through Thursday, or you want to play golf more than you want to work, I don't know what kind of business you're running, but I've not been able to find that kind of flexibility, especially if you're trying to evolve and keep your team, well oiled.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
well, I applaud you for doing everything you've done to have your company this long, have it clearly, be what it is today. And you are clearly making a difference in your community, which trickles out to our greater economy. And that's so important as a shop owner, right? This is the foundation of our economy is everything starts machining one way or another.
It's not necessarily about, we can't do it, or it'll never work, or, all those negatives that come up. I look at what we did with you guys. I mean, we were in such a bad place when it came to quoting, and it just wasn't working. And I'm like so frustrated that I don't know what to do. So I go right to the internet, and then I find you guys, and I make a couple calls, and all of a sudden now today we're like, what would we do without it? So I think that's the other message is, are you going to give up as an owner and say, well, it's just not possible? Or are you going to embody the mindset that I don't care what it's going to take. I don't care how much work I got to do. I don't care how many phone calls I got to make. I'm done. Like, this is going to change because it can.
Yeah.
You just got to do the work.
Yep. Yeah. Well, Jamie, thank you so much. Where do people find out more about you? What's your website?
Our website is www.builtwithatbyprecision.com.
Okay.
We're located in Algoma, Wisconsin, which is like 30 miles east of Green Bay, right on Lake Michigan. Most people, when they say, where's that? We just tell them we're at the base of Door County, and most everybody in America has been to Door County. Big little tourist town and just a cool place to go. So yeah, you can find us there.
Well, I'll make sure that links to your website and your LinkedIn profile and such are in the show notes. But thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed this. You're quite a remarkable gentleman, and I appreciate the wisdom that you've shared with all of us today. It was really awesome.
And I thank you too, Paul, for inviting me on. And I would also say that in my efforts to pay it forward, if anybody does want to reach out, ask questions, looking for some type of advice in the situation, I'm all ears. I'm willing to help. So yeah, don't be afraid to reach out and ask. And again, I'm gonna look at that as an opportunity for me to learn as well.
Love it. Thank you for that offer. I'm sure you might have some people take you up on it.